After watching the Oklahoma City Thunder and San Antonio Spurs series get pushed to a Game 7 last night, it's become more apparent to me that the Washington Wizards need to build their roster to survive the next era of basketball. I'm not even sure if the West is fully prepared for what's to come for the next few years when it comes to the Thunder and the Spurs. We saw the Spurs did to Minnesota, and we saw what OKC did to the rest of these West teams. And we all know that Will Dawkins and Michael Winger have some relations tying back to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And a lot of people are calling us OKC East in the making. But I think there's a chance that our rebuild is a lot closer to the Spurs rebuild versus the Oklahoma City. All in all, we got a lot of work to do. And it all starts with the number 1 draft pick. And before we landed the number 1 pick in this draft, even though we would have been fine with top 4, this team's rebuild didn't necessarily have a clear vision. We knew what the ties to the organization was. We knew what they were saying in the media. We felt the change from within happening. We saw that Ted Leonsis may have finally just said, hey, you know what? Let's tear it down. It's hard to just say good things and try to back them up, but it's even harder to actually show results and to stand on those results and keep it going. First thing you have to look at when it comes to OKC is they were smart and patient and they drafted well. And if you look back on all of their previous drafts, people always mention the SGA trade between Paul George and those draft picks. And yes, it did start from there. But even if they accumulated all of those draft picks, if they did not draft well, they would not have the team that they have now. If they didn't bring in Chris Paul to sort of nurture SGA, who knows what type of player SGA will become. And that probably was the foundation laid to him improving over time and becoming not only a skilled player, but a leader of that team. And if you look at OKC's draft history, they actually drafted Peyton Watson and traded him. They drafted Alphonse Sengun, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, and traded him. They drafted Josh Giddey and traded him, and he was a number 6 overall pick. I believe Jalen Williams he wasn't even a lottery pick. SGA was like number 11 or 12, even though they traded for him after his rookie year. So imagine them still making that Paul George trade, but messing up the draft. And that's what we saw with the Wizards at one point after getting John Wall. Immediately, we screwed up in the 2011 draft because that was not a weak draft. We screwed up. That one draft set us back quite a bit. And then we kind of made up for it in the 2012 draft with Bill. And then here comes the 2013 draft with Otto Porter. Now, Otto Porter was just a safe pick. And looking back on it, there were not too many star players in that draft. And Otto Porter helped us reach, Game 7 of the 2017 Eastern Conference semis. But he was not the player that we could have had in the 2011 NBA. So not only did OKC draft well, they were patient with their young players. And when you're not drafting the highest talent, you have to put emphasis on player development, giving them the tools to succeed not only on the court, but mentally and physically and outside of the court. You have to build a structure within the organization to where people understand that this is a business. And more importantly, you have to build a vision. This is sports. It's all about performance. It's all about projections. It's all about longevity. It's all about hope. You have to build hope when you're at the bottom. But you have to back that hope up with discipline and structure. And so far, has every draft pick that the Wizards have done been perfect? No. There's some question marks behind the above draft picks. There's some question marks behind Bilal. Hell, at one point, there were tons of question marks behind Alex Sarr. But it's amazing to me how OKC, even players like Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, the Hartenstein deal. They traded Josh Giddey, who is a fringe all-star player, for Alex Caruso. But they sacrificed the talent of Josh Giddey for the cohesiveness and the tenacity and the glue guy personnel of Alex Caruso. And honestly, I wouldn't mind if the Washington Wizards this season made an Alex Caruso move. Thunder can't, hell, what if they took Lou Dort from the Thunder because the Thunder can't even afford him anymore? And then we have Michael Winger and Will Dawkins. They are tied to that Oklahoma City foundation. They have connections to Sam Presti. So it's only right that they're bringing some of those elements from that rebuild to this rebuild, which is part of the reason why this has been a success so far, even though it was an ugly success. Very, 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 very ugly, man. And shout outs to the Locked On Wizards podcast for holding it down last year, man. Those guys really stuck it out and went through the mud more than anybody I saw. Shout out to the Dirty Bucket. That guy is a dog when it comes to supporting the Wizards. And that's what we should be all doing as a Wizards fan base, is repairing this team's reputation. Just because we were mediocre in the past doesn't mean we have to continue being mediocre. It started with that front office. It started with us convincing Ted to let us tear it all down. And it started with us having to be terrible, but also make strategic moves, not only for the present, but for the future. And one of the biggest mistakes that we made as a Washington Wizards organization was that Kevin Durant situation, where we had put all of our chips on the table and we had opened up so much cap space because we thought there was a possible chance that Kevin Durant would come to Washington, D.C. And I remember like it was yesterday, Kelly Oubre before the draft took a picture with Kevin Durant because they had connections or whatever. And there's a lot of people that still to this day believe that we only drafted Kelly Oubre because he was so-called cool with Kevin Durant. And in hindsight, it's like, bro, why did we do that? That definitely was not enough. If John Wall and Bradley Beal wasn't enough, Kelly Oubre wasn't going to be the icing on the cake. But those are the mistakes that we do have to avoid, especially if we want to follow in OKC's footsteps, and we see the result of it. Now, can we go out there and get an SGA and find our SGA? That's going to be tough, man. That's going to be very, 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 very tough. You don't just walk up and find an SGA. And a lot of people think that Darren Peterson can become an SGA. But I think those are just too big of a shoes to fill. And same thing with AJ. There's a lot of pressure to be the number one pick and to carry a franchise, especially a franchise like this one, who needs all the hope in the world. But I have more faith in AJ reaching his ceiling versus Darren Peterson. They're both talented. They both deserve to be number one pick in their own right. But given what the Washington Wizards franchise needs outside of just talent, I'm putting all my chips on AJ. And I'll probably make another video breaking down what separates AJ from the rest of his class. But yeah, because of that SGA situation, I think we're closer to a Spurs model than an OKC model. Now, are we making crazy transactions? Are we utilizing our assets? Are we taking on bad contracts to create flexibility? Are we developing our young core similar to OKC? Yes, but the way that our roster is structured is not as similar to OKC unless you want to compare Sard to Chet. And you can probably compare Keyshawn George to Jalen Williams, but we don't have an SGA type player. But if you look at the Spurs, there's a lot of similar comparisons to the Spurs. Before they got Wemby, they had some players who had all the potential in the world, but they were not good enough to carry the team and get them over the hump. Devin Vassell is a prime example. At one point, he was averaging 19 points a game. Keldon Johnson was right behind him at one point, around 19 and 20. And then they had a couple of other pieces that were very, very interesting that they had to move around and experiment. I remember at one point they had Jeremy Shohan, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, they had him playing point at one point. Then they got Wemby. But before they got Wemby, they were able to develop those core pieces that are surrounding him right now, and then they threw in a couple of veterans. They even got Kelly Olynyk off of our hands last year, which was probably the craziest trade that Will Dawkins has done in his tenure, outside of the Denny Avdija trade. Hell, I think that Kelly Olynyk trade, just even asking for him was just cringe, man. And if you're a real Wizards fan, you know exactly why. But they got Wemby. But before they had Wemby, they already had pieces in place. And then obviously the draft just went in their favor. Even in a weak draft, up until this point, you can say that they got the best player out of that draft in Stephon Castle. And he's really just a dog. That guy's a dog. And he doesn't even really have a jump shot. But he just knows how to play winning basketball. That's the difference with that guy. And then we all know if we didn't get Cooper Flag last year, we were just like, okay, give us Dylan Harper. And I was scared of getting Dylan Harper because I actually love Jordan Poole. But Jordan Poole is just not a player that you can just build your team around. We all see what Jordan Poole really is. And he had a chance to show what he could be here, but it just did not pan out. But I was scared. I was like, man, I love Jordan Poole. I just had grown attached to him. But man, having Dylan Harper on this squad would have been very, very, very nice, especially with AJ coming into the fold. But they had some lottery luck, and they made the smart move by not overthinking it. They could have overthought that draft. But Dylan Harper was but Dylan Harper was a no-brainer. And they had already made the deal for De'Aaron Fox. By them making that trade for De'Aaron Fox and then drafting Dylan Harper gets to come in here with no pressure. And that young fella can handle the pressure anyway. He's showing it in the Western Conference Finals right now. But they have the pieces in place to still help their young core develop, and they're very freaking young. And then you still have some mid-tier veterans that know how to play winning basketball to help the young people come along. Hell, what if Devin Vassell really hasn't even reached his peak yet? We know Stephon Castle hasn't reached his peak. For God's sake, Wemby hasn't even reached his peak. For God's sake, Dylan Harper is a rookie right now. It's insane when you think about it. But I think when you connect the dots, yeah, we would love to be OKC East, but I think we're closer to being a Spurs mode, especially if Alex Sarr remains at center. And I think the vision with him is to remain at center so that he can be versatile on offense and defense. But in the future, you're going to have to match up with Wemby. And what other players do you know in the league is even close to matching up with Wemby? It's Chet, and then there's Alex Sarr. I guess you could say Jared Allen or Evan Mobley. I mean, all of those players pale in comparison to Wemby, but I'm just saying, if you have to get somebody on your team to match up with Wemby, I would want to have one of those 4 or 5 players. And luckily, we have one of those 4 or 5 players in Alex Sarr. Then, just from a small tidbit, they have Julian Champagnie. We have Justice Champagnie. They're both dogs. Julian Champagnie is such a dog that he was starting at the 4 spot. Who's to say that Justin Champagnie, who has been in the trade box the past year or so, doesn't work his way to starting? Simply because he plays winning basketball and he has that toughness that this squad is lacking. And he can really play the 2, the 3, or the 4 in any given situation as well. Then you throw in De'Aaron Fox. We just made the trade for Trae Young. How much better is De'Aaron Fox than Trae Young? And we're not talking about defense. We're talking about being a leader. We're talking about orchestrating an offense. We're talking about speed, getting other players involved, hitting big shots, being clutch. Trae Young is one of the closest players you can think of to match that mold that the Spurs are building with De'Aaron Fox. And then, fortunately, they have Dylan Harper coming off the bench to back up De'Aaron Fox. We haven't necessarily found our Dylan Harper, but maybe Bub can really turn it around. We've seen him improve his shot drastically, and I think Trey Johnson, that competitiveness helped him improve his jump shot. And maybe Trey Johnson turns into that Dylan Harper where he can be more of a combo guard instead of just an off guard. And then you look at the pieces like Keldon Johnson, who used to be a starter. He bought in and came off the bench to sacrifice for the team and won 6 minutes of the year. Devin Vassell took a step back into another role. You can look at Will Riley. You can look at Keyshawn George. You can look at Bilal kind of fitting some of those molds. But regardless, everything we've been through the past 3 years, even the mediocrity with, after Westbrook left and John Wall tore his Achilles, this might be the most exciting time to be a Washington Wizards fan. There's a lot that we still have to figure out with Anthony Davis. We have to make the best decision for our organization on draft night. And if it is trading back, so be it. If that's what they think is the best decision, then so be it. I'm going to rock with the team. I've rocked with them for this long. Might as well keep going. But we have to evaluate our young guys even more. If we're going to stand pat and keep this team close to what it is now and not make any trades for any veteran players, and this year is just a test for the young guys to see who really can stick around, then I'll stand with that. And I believe Michael Winger made a statement like, hey, there's going to be a short leash this year. We don't have time for mistakes anymore. We're about to draft our potential franchise player. We do not want to waste any years with this franchise player. CA is relatively young. Wemby is relatively young. Cade Cunningham is relatively young. These teams are not trying to wait till year 6 or 7 to compete with their young players. The new era of basketball is building young teams that can win, that can hustle, that can run the floor, that can be tenacious on defense, that can be dogs on the floor, that can handle the pressure, that are playing basketball for more than just a paycheck. That's the new era of basketball, and I hope that the Washington Wizards understand that. I hope that's part of the vision, and I hope that the moves that we make are headed in that direction. And I'm not against us shooting for a play-in team. I just think that we can shoot higher than that and not sacrifice the development of our young guys. And we've seen it. The young guys can still be a crucial part of the rebuild and still develop, and let some other guys who have a little bit more experience help lead them the way to eventually taking on their permanent roles within this team. But Once again, man, this is the most exciting time to be a Washington Wizards fan. I know some people are seeing a lot of people just pop up out of nowhere. I'm essentially popping up out of nowhere because this is a new podcast, but I've been a Wizards fan for so long, man. I've been through the ups and downs, and I'll probably make content talking about some of those ups and downs and throughout this journey. I'm in it for the long haul, and yeah, man, I appreciate anybody that's watching this video. Let's help return this franchise back to some relevancy, and let's exceed all of our previous highlights. You know, not just from on the court perspective, but just from a reputation standpoint. And we play a big part of that as well as a fan base. I'm done yapping, man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for rocking out with me. Wiz Kids for life.